Yeah, so it caught my attention that some fellow colleagues were attacking the Writers Guild people who were striking. I don't know if you've got the tweets handy, so
Oh yeah.
we can reference them. I mean, it's going to be easier for me to talk about it if we can show people what we're referring to, because I mean, look, let me just say, the overarching reason why I would do this on your show is because one of the things that I really want to push back against people on the left is this idea that I'm not allowed to enjoy pieces of entertainment or culture that don't 100% match up with the
Yep.
politics or ideas that you think are supposed to be the thing that we promote day in and day out. That somehow, if I tell you I like a TV show or a movie that is imperfect, that somehow that's a signal that I have lost touch, that somehow like I've sold out because I consumed that piece of entertainment. And I think that, I'm sorry to say, I'm going to use Anya and Alex, who I've interviewed before. I've interviewed both of these people who are going to be featured here. I've interviewed,
Yep.
and they were respectful interviews. They were 2 or 3 years ago at this point, if not longer, but they were people who I talked about Venezuela with, or I talked about, I disagreed with, although I hesitate to like indulge in it now because of where the right wing has taken it. But there was a CIA ad, a very infamous CIA ad that applied to appealed to identity politics in order to try and get people hired. And I had Alex on and we were mocking it and laughing. We were talking about some other stuff that he had written. But I see as like representative of like policing what people on the left consume as entertainment. And I resent that.
Oh yeah, 100% correct, Kevin. And just in case anyone's tuning in that doesn't really know the context in which we're discussing all of this, the Writers Guild of America, which represents almost 12,000 screenwriters, went on strike earlier this month after contract negotiations with studios, streaming services, and networks failed. If you guys aren't aware, writers in Hollywood are one of the most disrespected and exploited groups of creatives in the industry, in my opinion. And because of the ever evolving nature of streaming services and the way that shows make money in today's day and age, they're increasingly exploited. So if you're a writer on a show that totally blows up and ends up becoming a mega sensation, you don't really get paid fairly. You're not really seeing the result of that show's success reflected in your own paycheck. And this is obviously a huge problem as far as the exploitation of workers are concerned. Most people on the left seem to be on the same page in that they are expressing solidarity with these striking writers, acknowledging the fact that writers are, for the most part, working class people, with a few exceptions. Obviously, if you rise to the highest ranks, you're going to be getting paid a lot of money. But the vast majority of the people in the WGA, I would say, are pretty thoroughly working class folks that are just, doing their job, trying to get by like the rest of us. However, there's been this weird strain of criticism from some people across ideological spectrum, but we've seen it rear its head a little bit within this I don't know what you want to call it. I'll just refer to it as the gray zone, corner of leftism, with Anya Parampil and Max Blumenthal and here Alex Rubinstein kind of expressing disdain for this class of workers, acting as if the WGA writers are somehow just an arm of, U.S. propaganda, and as if their whole job is really just to produce content glorifying the political ruling class and decadent lifestyles of the uber wealthy. So here Anya is basically spitting in the face of these TV writers, of these striking workers, telling them to get a real job, which I thought was just insane. And even if I agree with some of Anya's criticisms here of, popular television, saying that it produces content glorifying the political ruling class and decadent lifestyles of the uber wealthy, that's certainly true in some instances. Some shows are absolutely guilty of doing just that. However, it's really bizarre to me that this comment this criticism is like divorced from what I think would be a pretty obvious analysis of the capitalist system and the society that we all live in, which forces many people across many different professions to produce products that might be considered unhelpful or not good for society. I mean, the example that I wrote about on Twitter was fast food workers. I don't think that McDonald's is good for anyone. I don't think the food that workers at McDonald's make is good for society. Fast food is terrible. However, would you ever tell a McDonald's worker to get a real job because it is in fact their occupation to flip those burgers and fry those French fries to fatten up American society and increase obesity and all that stuff? Of course not. That's ridiculous. And I think most people would recognize that. However, when it comes to these striking writers, there seems to that analysis doesn't seem to be included. And yeah, sure, some of the stuff that these folks write might qualify as Russiagate propaganda, as Max Blumenthal said in reference to the writers of the Colbert Show. But we have to keep in mind that's just their job. They got assigned to write on this show. It's not like these people are Karine Jean-Pierre, or it's not like they're propagandists who are just trying to start World War III or something like that. And I think it's totally insane to imply that.
So I think that the problem with a lot of this is that these are gross generalizations, and it makes it really difficult to have an intelligent conversation about what's going on, because there are those writers who might be doing late night television jokes that do promote a kind of political humor that I don't really have any interest in at all. And that's fair if you're not a fan. But I would actually submit that there's a difference between you not liking what shows produce as in the content that they are putting out versus believing that they shouldn't have a living wage when they are engaged in their job. And you're effectively saying that because you disagree with their perceived politics, that you would rather see them thrown out of work. And remember, presumably, this is what they have been trained to do. These are their skills. They probably went to school for it. They probably have spent their life trying to be writers, or at some point they gave up their shit job as a barista at Starbucks, and they took a chance, and they got lucky, and they found something that they could try to scrounge by, and they've been able to do this. Like a really good example is The Bear. I was just
going to bring this up, the Guardian article. Yep.
Yeah, The Bear has been a prominent example during the strike. This guy, Alex O'Keefe, I don't watch the show, so I'm not going to pretend like I know what I'm talking about when I reference the show. But my minimal understanding is that, and you can do a better job, so maybe I'll limit what I say and let you fill in, but the family sandwich shop that he goes to help with, that's a pretty working class establishment that he's in, and that this show probably is not a bougie show that you are watching on TV. That watching The Bear does not mean that you are some kind of elitist among the ruling class.
Oh, quite opposite, actually. I know a lot of people liked it a lot. And, I work in the service industry, right? And obviously it's a little bit of a different line of work than what I'm doing in the show. But a lot of people, it was like a hot controversy really between restaurant workers that, whether or not you dug the show or whether or not you were one of those people that wanted to find like every single flaw about how it's not 100% identical to like real restaurant life. But that is the perfect example, Kevin, in a direction I wasn't even going to take that. This is an absolute representation of working class life, like how regular people work together, bang things out in a restaurant, have temperatures fucking flail, and then you drink beers after work and you're like, fuck it, we're going to deal with something else tomorrow. Let's never talk about this again. You know what I mean? That ethos is very working class. So yeah, not to cut you off, but yeah, just to echo.
Well, I just think it's so easy to refute the idea that the face of this strike are people who are promoting bougie content that is out of touch with America. Quinta Brunson and Brittany Nichols of Abbott Elementary, that's a hugely popular show. It's one of the only shows that have like captured the slice of life of what it's like to be a teacher in America. And that is a working class television program. And maybe they're not pushing a political agenda, but by representing what goes on and giving people a voice for the kind of dilemmas and conflicts and shit that you have to deal with on a daily basis, which is probably what's going on in the Bear. Those lived experiences are giving people in the working class a means to challenge. Not to mention also, and so there are 2 points to make here, but I'll continue. Not to mention two insanely popular shows in the last year have been White Lotus and Succession, which are all about showing you how people who are rich elitists are out of touch with the world around them. And the writers who have worked on those shows are the very ones who stand to benefit from this writers' strike, because what they're arguing is that they are not getting a piece of the streaming pie and they should be able to get paid when stuff is being streamed. Like my understanding is they're only getting one payment when they do this work. And then all of the money that's generated through streaming is going to the companies that have greenlit these productions.
Yeah, it's 100% maximalist extraction from the workers. You take somebody who has, if you're WGA, you're lucky, but they always are, throwing the looming threat of like, we'll go outside of the union, which most of the time they won't if they're like a legitimate, Hollywood production, because they have standards and whatnot, and it would cause a huge problem for them. But there's always the looming threat of somebody being like, new, young, hungry, scrappy, that quit their job as a barista and desperately wants to do this for a living, and they wage that against you, so they'll get you into a contract where you're in like a writer's room and you get paid like one lump sum at the beginning and then one lump sum at the end, and then you send off your writing work. And when you're a writer, nobody knows how the show is going to turn out. Nobody has any idea. You wrote the first season, they picked it up the first season, and then after that, like that dude that you mentioned that wrote for the Bear, talking about how he was getting multiple overdraft fees on his way to go receive an award for the show that he was a writer on. And just to scale back for a second, I want everybody to consider for just one moment how revolting it would be and unpopular it would be, at least with people who I think consistently hold solidarity with workers across the board. Let's just go back a little bit ago to talk about the striking railroad workers. Let's talk about the striking John Deere workers. Let's talk about anybody that's a working class person, basically in middle and not South America, but Southern America, right? Like in the Midwest and South blob of this country. You're going to have so many of those people who do not fucking agree with you on any kind of politics, right? That think that, they're waiting for the next QAnon drop and that, Marjorie Taylor Greene is a hero. And are those people supposedly not supposed to have a living wage either? Am I supposed to turn my nose up at the rail card workers? Oh, sorry, you guys deserve this, sorry, you should have gone to college, blah, blah, blah. Like, what are you talking about? Like, what kind of, they voted for Donald Trump, so why do I have to care what happens to them? It's like, what happened to the term solidarity, right? What happened to understanding that this is a worker issue? What happened to class over everything? I mean, just absolute nonsense to think that would ever fly. Like, oh, sorry, I don't like John Deere because a lot of the people that work for that company are conservatives. You can see the math, dude. Most of them are Trump. Like, who cares? I don't care. I care that everybody has a living wage. I care that they don't have to fucking stress about their mortgage. That, I care these things, right? And I think that that's a universal right, like not dependent on who you voted for. And that's supposed to be like one of the most fundamental bedrocks of like our left politics in America, right? That, going back throughout all of our history, right, is that it's about, banding together across political lines to exercise our collective voice against the ownership class, against the bosses. And to just see that be thrown out the window for like some cheap points on Twitter to be like, I hate liberals. It's like, so I hate liberals too, but I still want them to be able to eat dinner,
Yeah, I mean, they just have to meet their quota for dunks on shit libs in any given day. And I go back to what I said about generalizing people based on their perceived politics, which I think is wrong. And they would accuse me of being wrong if I judged all the truckers that were out at the freedom convoys based on how I perceived their politics as people who were out there protesting, getting the jabby jab, and how they were out there, even though I believe what we learned is that a lot of those truckers were actually owners and not necessarily rank and file union, and they were getting some money from right-wing organizations in the United States that wanted those people to be out there. I don't know how grassroots it was, because those protests disappeared pretty quickly once Joe Biden.
Yeah, the term astroturf comes.
Yeah, I think they were astroturfers. But okay, let me go along with you and pretend like those people genuinely had an issue. I would be at fault if I painted them with a broad brush and said, all of those people are racists. They are not open to this. They just want to hate on gay people and transgender people. And, oh, by the way, they're uneducated and they, they just want to wave their guns and wave their flags. Like, obviously, not every single one of them would probably be that caricature that I was painting in my head. But that's what you're doing to the WGA strikers. You are creating this image that all of them are like Hillary Clinton, pussy hat wearing people who go to the Washington Monument and think that, Putin made Donald Trump his bitch. And it's just like, that's your cartoon version of what you think the WGA striker is. Meanwhile, I would say, since I think we're winding down, my last thing I would say on this is, if you really want to unpack all of the granular details of what is animating these strikers, you understand that they do not want to strike. They are not doing this for attention. This is not something they would like to do. They are not excited to have to go out there and wave the sign and say, honk if you love TV. And if you listen to, I just recommend, I told Gavin about this. I'll tell your entire audience. Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardine did an episode of Fat Man and Beyond a Stream yesterday.
Shout out to Kevin Smith, fan favorite on the Vanguard.
So, that was film school. I mean, I know that's probably your film school, but that was, once I was introduced, it was off to the races. And so listening to them speak from their experience as writers, and obviously Kevin is a director, but Mark has a lot of writing experience, and I think he's Writers Guild. There would be no reason for Kevin. Well, he could be Writers Guild if he wants, but I think he's probably Directors Guild if he's any guild. Anyways, Mark was speaking in great detail about what are the friction points, what are the reasons why these people are not seeing eye to eye, why there was no bargain or agreement this time, why they had to go on strike. And it goes on for a long time. And I learned a lot. And it's not really political. It's not about like labor militancy. It's just like understanding what has happened in the industry to where these people don't have what they need to get by. And it's the same thing we've seen in conversations about the railroads. It's the same thing we've seen in conversations about other spaces in our country. And the solidarity that you should have on the left, if you call yourself a leftist and you are trashing people who are in the Writers Guild because of their perceived politics, then I think you are missing the fact that the people there are actually closer to the truckers in their class status than people who, clink glasses with State Department ambassadors.
Oh, totally. I mean, some truckers actually get paid fairly well. That's the funny thing. I mean, it's not like these writers in some instances are making all that much more than someone that might drive a truck. Perhaps in some instances they definitely are. But I'm just blown away by how stupid this argument is on its face value. That even if every single member of the Writers Guild was just writing shitlib propaganda for Stephen Colbert and The Daily Show and all this stuff, even if that's like the totality of the WJ, which obviously it is not, that makes up a small percentage of all the writers working in Hollywood that are on strike right now. But even if that was the majority of them, they're still workers. They're still producing content for these giant corporations and parent companies that are then exploiting their labor in order to turn a profit far greater than what they pay these workers. So regardless of the content they're making, regardless of the political persuasion they might be pandering to, just from a basic anti-capitalist perspective, if you're producing content that's making a corporation or a boss a bunch of money, then you should be fairly compensated for that profit that you're generating with your pen and your talent as a writer. Again, completely disregarding the content. You could be writing for the Daily Wire making conservative propaganda, and I would still say, of course, you should be paid fairly to do so, and all of the money that you create with your talent and your ability should not just flow to the top, should not just flow to the boss and the CEO.